Personally, I like the Toyota Tacoma a lot, and I tend to recommend it to people. I mean, purely for objective reasons. I mean, I'm not like biased to any particular brand or anything. I mean, that would just be silly. I have a question for this review. Who is the Toyota Tacoma Trail for? Because it's positioned between the more capable TRD Off-Road just beneath it, and then the insanely capable TRD Pro just above it. So how exactly does that make sense? Well, I think I know. I think I have a good idea exactly who the Toyota Tacoma Trail Edition is targeted at. It's targeted at active posers, people like me. Last year, I had the opportunity to be among the first people in America to drive the new Toyota Tacoma SR5 Trail Edition. The Trail that I was driving was practically a display model, so it had four-wheel drive, but that was it. But it still, in typical Tacoma fashion, handled everything that we could throw at it. I loved it, especially the look of it, and that's the key, really, what we're talking about here. So let's talk about that for a second. I mean, just look at it. This is peak taco right here. You get bronze 16-inch wheels wrapped in Wrangler tires. You get a 1.1-inch suspension lift in the front and a 0.5 suspension lift in the rear. The stance of this Tacoma is just perfect. Not to mention that with army green paint, those bronze accents just pop. I'm typically more of a kind of gray, lunar rock, I believe is the color that Toyota calls it. I'm more of that kind of color fan when it comes to Tacomas, but man, the bronze accents look good with this army green. Up front, you get this Heritage grille, which is about as close to the TRD Pro's styling as you can get. This is really appealing, mainly because the TRD Pro looks amazing. So giving buyers the option of having a lot of that TRD Pro style with maybe a reduced skill set is a really appealing kind of value proposition, especially to posers like me. In the rear here, there's nothing really special to talk about. You get the traditional 5-foot-long bed, but the Trail Edition gives you something that no other Tacoma models gives you. It has an integrated rail system, which is nice, but what it really gives you that sets it apart are these lockable bed boxes, one of which is a cooler. Now, if you're using your pickup truck bed as a pickup truck bed, you might not want these, but I freaking love them, and I would absolutely take them along with the diminished bed capacity. I think that's a trade-off that a lot of buyers might be willing to make. Everything about the Tacoma's interior is small truck fine.
We're all fine here now, thank you.
It's certainly not as wretched as the Ford Rangers, and it's not really any better or worse than the GM twins either. The plastics are still acceptable for a small truck, and I imagine in the next generation Tacoma, Toyota's gonna take a big step forward in this regard, as well as probably with the infotainment system. This is still running Toyota's old infotainment system, which compared to modern infotainment systems is a lot like comparing a PlayStation 5 to a set of Uno cards that are missing some draw fours.
Let's get started, shall we?
It's functional, but not in the same charming way that the Toyota Tacoma is. More like in the same way a neti pot is.
Ew.
Yeah, look that up. No, don't. Really don't. I've got no problem with the space, and these seats are comfortable. However, adjusting the seat and the steering wheel for a tall person means that the rear seats then become usable only for somebody with, like, no legs. I think it feels a bit on the smaller side compared to the GM Twins and the Nissan Frontier, so don't be surprised if the next Tacoma grows slightly. And since the steering barely adjusts for reach, kind of like the Frontier's doesn't adjust for reach at all, which is inexcusable, but this one barely adjusts for reach. It's like 1 inch. So I'm sitting a bit closer and more upright to the steering wheel than I normally would be. Now, I don't mind so much in this truck, but I'm gonna sit in the back and you'll see that even with the seat sort of compromised for someone of my height, how much space do I have? Yeah, no, this isn't really going to work at all. So if you're 6'5" or above and someone 6'5" or above wants to sit behind you, the answer is no. Yeah, see, so the driving position ends up being kind of like the Nissan Frontier because this wheel telescopes like, you know, a millimeter. So as tall as I am, my arms are stretched out pretty far. I don't mind all that much. It's not quite as bad as it was on the Frontier. But it is, you know, something to think about if you're a taller person. Ergonomically, everything's okay. I mean, it's within easy reach with big gauges and the infotainment system's right here. Climate control's a little bit low, and the Casio calculator display that the climate control has, which, I mean, looks pretty old. That's kind of canted almost downwards, so it's not a deal breaker or anything. Light pickup trucks are not exactly the most luxurious vehicles. And the seats are fine over time. I do think they're comfortable, but they're not exactly like the Nissan Frontier seats where they have that space cushion or whatever Nissan calls it.
Space.
Now, in case you've been living under a rock for like the past decade, the Tacoma is powered by a 278 horsepower V6, which makes 265 pound-feet of torque, and that runs through a 6-speed automatic transmission. Is that enough? Yeah, sure, but pretty much every other small truck has a more potent engine and powertrain combo.
Potent potables.
The Tacoma Trail comes standard with 4-wheel drive and a locking rear differential, but it lacks the TRD Off-Road's multi-terrain select and crawl control, which means it lacks that model's ceiling controls, and that makes me a bit sad. You know how I feel about ceiling controls. On the freaking ceiling. Ceiling controls. Ceiling controls. Ceiling controls. Ceiling controls. Now, in terms of the powertrain, it's fine. Pickup is okay. It's not slow. It's definitely not slow, but it is sort of starting to lag behind some of the competition. And I know some people don't love the 6-speed automatic in the Tacomas. They find it to be a little hunty. It didn't bother me before, honestly, but having recently driven some of the light pickup competition with the GMC Canyon and the Nissan Frontier, those transmissions and powertrains are better tuned. So the Tacoma's, powertrain, the transmission is feeling a little old. It's not always sure of itself. So I would say if you were testing this thing in a vacuum and you didn't test drive anything else, you probably wouldn't mind all that much. But the competition is advancing, and I think that's important to note. Now, keep in mind also that there is a new Tacoma on the horizon. GM just dropped the new Canyon in Colorado, and the Frontier's refreshed, although I think that's going to fall to the back of the pack soon enough. And there's a Tacoma on the horizon to wait for. So how desperately you want to buy this might determine how willing you are to sort of make do with the transmission. And in terms of the driving experience, the Tacoma is sort of noteworthy in my opinion for how slow the steering is. And I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. It's just this is calibrated to be a sort of working off-road kind of capable pickup truck. So despite being slow, the steering is accurate and it has a sort of progressive nature to it. So it's not like you don't know what's going on at the front end. It's just the wheel requires a lot of turning. And it's the same with the kind of gas pedal, the throttle calibration. It tips in very slowly, very gently. This pays dividends if you're off-road. I know, I've off-roaded these Tacomas last year, the Trail and the TRD Pro, and they are insanely capable off-road, like hard to match for any other pickup truck. Now, the suspension driving along in this Tacoma is good considering this thing is lifted and it's on larger kind of off-road biased tires. So I'm impressed with the ride of this Tacoma Trail. It's not as good as the GMC Canyon, which I think is the ride and handling champ. I had the AT4 trim, so sort of similar to this, and the ride was incredible. However, that pickup truck is so much more expensive. I don't think it feels that much more expensive from behind the wheel. I think this one is nearly as good, and it's certainly, you know, not worth thousands of dollars more to get the Canyon. So if you're performing dad duties like I am and you're driving the kids around and you want to daily drive this Tacoma Trail, I think you'd be absolutely fine daily driving this Tacoma Trail. There's nothing from the driving experience to hold you back, and I think that is what makes this thing so appealing, is that kind of middle ground of capability and daily usability. Not to mention the looks. Have I mentioned the looks? I've mentioned the looks. Not to mention the looks. This thing just looks great. The Tacoma Trail starts at just over 40 grand, and as you see it here in this video, it's just a hair over $42,000. It's got a few options on it, like a center console safe. That's not cheap, and in case you're wondering, that's only about $3,000 less than a fairly loaded TRD off-road trim, which is even more capable off-road. So that's something you want to consider depending on how much of a priority that is for you. It's also cheaper than the Nissan Frontier Pro 4X, but the Pro 4X has a few more off-road goodies, is faster overall, and feels a bit more modern with a much more modern infotainment system. Looks, of course, are subjective, but I think that the Taco Trail looks better than pretty much anything else in this price point. The GMC Canyon AT4 trim is actually much more expensive than this Tacoma Trail, but it's probably a little bit more capable off-road, has a much more compelling powertrain. But it too feels just as old as this Tacoma with its lame incandescent headlights and physical key. Like, what's that about? It's also objectively not as good looking as the Tacoma Trail, or most of the Tacomas in general. So, when it comes to these sort of capable light pickup trucks, what do you do?
What do you do?
This is a tough one, but I think the Tacoma Trail is actually aimed squarely at someone like me. As romantic as I am about the notion of doing some hardcore off-roading, I'm probably much more likely to just hop a curb and tailgate out of the built-in cooler in the bed. The Tacoma Trail looks the absolute business with its sort of TRD style and actual lift kit. And the more I think about it, the more I understand why Toyota positioned it where it is in the lineup, in between the TRD Pro and the TRD Off-Road. But since I always try to be honest with you guys on this channel, let me leave it at this. As much as I like the Toyota Tacoma, there is a new one on the horizon, and if it was my money and I was thinking about purchasing a very capable light pickup truck, I'm probably holding out for that one. But if you need a light pickup truck right this second, the Toyota Tacoma SR5 Trail Edition is absolutely a good option. Guys, thanks so much for watching. I hope you found this video informative. Let me know in the comments what light pickup truck you prefer. As always, pickup trucks definitely generate a lot of opinions. So I'd love to hear yours, and I'd love to hear your reasons why. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and please consider subscribing to the channel for more enthusiastic dad impressions of new cars, trucks, and EVs. And I hope you stick around. If you do, I'll catch you in the next one. All right? Peace.